Good morning, everybody. So this is our Saturday morning golden rods and reels Zoom fly tying session. And Florin and I will each do a pattern today. I'm going to do the first one. And this one is a pike pattern. It's from this book, Flies for Pike and Panfish. And this is the pattern here. And it's called a Dahlberg Flashdancer. The inventor was Larry Dahlberg, somewhere in the States. So I figure some guys are going to be fishing for these little pike that we find in Elk Lake. So I think we'll
pike or bass?
Bass in Elk Lake. So it'll probably work for pike too. So I've tied this one is on a little longer shank, because it's a little tough to get this collar crunched in the front. But the one I'll tie is not going to be on the longer hook. So this is just the standard TMCO 200R hook, 2X long, slightly curved nymph hook. And first thing I do is make sure I crush down the barb. And then we'll put him in the vise. I might have to tighten that up a bit. Leave the point exposed. Okay. So thread is black 6/0. And I'm going to start the thread maybe about 1/3 of the shank length behind the eye. And that's a marker. I don't want to come any further forward with the body than where that thread starts. Otherwise, you're going to have a terrible time doing the deer hair head, trying to get it on there without impaling your fingers when you push the deer hair backwards. And I'll bring the thread right down the shank to where the barb used to be. Let the thread hang. And the tail is red Marabou. I got the big package here. It'd be best if you could get the Marabou plumes, because they're a little easier to deal with. If you're trying to use the end stuff at the end here, they're really long and sparse. So I end up pulling the stuff off the bottom edge of this. And I'll just pull the shorter ones out to the side, grab them all by the tip, and then strip them off the stem. There we go. So I have a nice little clump of red Marabou. I'll measure that basically shank length, eye to bend, and bring that down and put that right where the thread is hanging. And I will tie it down with through my fingers and a pinch wrap right there. And then I'm going to just use my fingers to just get another little bit of red material on the shank and before I trim the butts. And that just makes sure that when I'm finished with it, I'm not going to be able to pull a Marabou out the back. Trim off the ends and then bring my thread right back to where that's tied in again. I'll lift the tail up and do a wrap in behind it. Pull underneath to the front, one in front, and then in behind, and then one in front. And the purpose of that is to cause the tail not to wrap around the bottom of the hook. Bring the thread back to the start-in point. The body is this speckled white pearl or white chenille. You could probably use any kind of white chenille, but I like the little bit of flash that comes off of this stuff. And what I'll do is just pinch off a little bit at the end to expose the little piece of white core yarn. And I'll tie that down and then wrap over it right back to where the red is. Quickly bring my thread up to the front and just do a quick half hitch, because it makes it easier for me to, and leave the thread right where I started the thread on the shank. And then I'll take my Perl Marabou and or Perl Chenille, and I'll twist it a bit, and I'll use the rotary vise to make a nice, smooth, even body. And every once in a while, I'll give that chenille a little bit of a twist so that it's nice and fuzzy as I wrap forward. And then when I get to just in front of where I had the thread start, I'm going to stop wrapping forward. I'll take my thread up and over the back in that V that you make between the body and the chenille. And then I will wrap in front of it just to lock it in. And then I will come in here with my scissors and trim it off. That's the chenille. The next thing I need to do is make sure the thread is clear of the eye, because I'm going to put my deer hair on in the front as well as the material for the flash at the back. Now the flash at the back is just Flashabou, and this stuff is kind of a goldish color. What is it? It doesn't give a name for it, but it is holographic Flashabou, and it's golden color. And I'll take a section that's probably twice as long as the hook shank all the way down to the end of the tail. And I will cut that off. Then what I'll do with this is I'm going to fold it in half around the thread. Just fold it over around the thread so that the tips line up as best I can. So sometimes a little bit of spit, this stuff tends to get a little staticky and it will stick out at odd angles. Oh, come on. There we go. And then what I'll do is I'll just set it right on top of the white chenille and pull it back so it overhangs the tag end of the hook. And I'll wrap backwards a little bit to cinch it down. And wrap enough in front so that I can create a spot here for it to be at the back. There we go. So that's the flash now. I'll get it wet because I want it to stay where it is. Then I got to put my deer hair collar on, and the deer hair I've got is just regular deer hair, tan deer hair. I like the stuff with the white tips. It gives it a little bit more a color variation, I think. And I'll take not a huge clump, maybe, you know, a reasonable pinch size, maybe a gap width of deer hair. And I'll cut this right off of the hide, right down at the bottom. Hold it by the tips and take my comb. Now you can get a mustache comb. I couldn't find mine, but if you can find yourself a mustache comb, it's a very fine tooth comb, and that lets you get stroking out all of the fluff. And the reason for doing that is it makes it easier to stack, and it makes it easier to spin when you decide to spin it. So then I'm going to take this stuff and I'm going to put it in my hair stacker, which is there. Tamp it down and just keep from making noise. I'm going to do that on my knee. And even up the tips. There's a couple of little extras. Get them nice and smooth. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to do what they call stack it as opposed to spinning it. And the trick with stacking is you want it to sit right on top like that, and about halfway down the body, maybe a little less than halfway down the body. So I'm going to pinch that with my left hand right where I want it, and hold that in that spot from the tips. Then I'll take my scissors and I will cut the butts off. I'd say a little more than maybe a 1/4 inch or so in front of my fingers. So I just have this little bit of deer hair sticking out. Then I'll sit this down right where my thread is, bring the thread up between my fingers, push it back, down between my fingers and push it back. And I'll pinch the deer hair pretty solid, and then do another wrap like that in between my fingers, down the far side, and bring it up. And now I've got my deer hair stacked on top of the hook. And then I'll take and I'll pull this other stuff back, and I will wrap my thread through it, the butts through it, so that that bit of deer hair in the front, the short stuff, sticks up. And I'll take my deer hair packer, which, if you haven't got one of these, I don't know where you get them, but you can get a little metal one that pushes along the shank that allows you to push the stack of deer hair backwards. And I'll put that on there and right up against the hook shank and push it back. Bring my thread in front. So now I'm going to make the deer hair head. I have a different deer hair, and this is much finer deer hair. This takes a little bit of dexterity. So I'm going to take about the same, maybe same size clump of deer hair right down at the bottom and cut it off. And once again, I'm going to use my comb, hold it right by the tips, comb out all of the fuzz. You see this particular deer hair has a little more fuzz in the bottom. So I'm gonna, and I want to keep this deer hair clump that I'm going to put on. This is going to be, instead of stacked on, this is going to be spun on. So I'll get all the loose bits out of here. And then I don't need to stack this stuff. So I'm going to hold it so that I have about the middle of that, in the middle of the bunch. I'll take my scissors and I'll trim it square about that 1/4 inch in front. I need enough to be able to, now that I've got that, I want to take this whole batch of deer hair, and this is where it gets a little tricky. I'll grab it with my right hand, turn it around, grab the tips with the hand again, and I will hold it so that I've got a really short batch of deer hair there on the left side, and I'll cut an equally short batch on the right side. And the reason for doing that is that I need to have it short enough that it's going to spin reasonably well. I've got a few extra long ones here. And I'll hold that by the tips and lay it down on the hook shank just in front of that last batch of deer hair. Now bring my thread up and wrap it over gently, the deer hair in between my fingers, down the far side. Then bring it up gently, and I'm not tightening it yet. Now when I get to that point, I'm going to start pushing the deer hair around the shank with my thread at the same time as I tighten. And when I do that, I will let it go. And the deer hair will then subsequently, if I pull good and solid, will subsequently spin around the hook. And I want to make sure that the the long deer hair that I've tied in the collar doesn't spin. So hold on to that, and I'll make sure that the part that I just put on spins around the shank. When I get there, I'm going to pull back with my fingers and wrap in front of the deer hair, right behind the eye of the hook, and build a little bit of a head. Once again, I'm going to take my hair packer, and I'm going to just push it back a little bit to make sure it's nice and compact and that I can get my thread in the front. And then I'll whip finish. And that's that part. Now the fun begins. It's trimming. So the first thing I'll do is I will take all those long guard hairs that I put on that are at the back of the head, make sure they're positioned so that they're hanging over top of the chenille and the flash. So you can see I got the longer stuff with the tips sticking out the back on the top of the hook, facing backwards. Then what I'll do is make sure that the flash is on top. I'll just pull that up. Make sure it's sitting on top. Turn my fly upside down, take my long scissors, and go from the eye of the hook back and cut it flat, even with where the chenille is. So I want this to be flat on the bottom. Sometimes you have to get in from behind and lift up some of that deer hair that's overhanging the chenille, and just cut it parallel to the hook shank, nice and short. And the whole purpose of this is to create a flat bottom on that deer hair head. Then I'll come in the top and I will put my scissors down on the pointy bits that stick to the back and push them out of the way. Pull the scissors up to where the spun deer hair is and cut it at a bit of an angle, the fuzzy stuff. And I'll do that all the way down. I'll take that long deer hair stuff that's hanging out the back, and I'll push it down with the scissors and then come in front and just trim that other stuff at a bit of an angle towards the front. Do it all the way around on three sides and the top, so that you get this little separation between the ball of deer hair at the front and the collar at the back. That just gives you a little bit of space between the two. And when I get that looking good at that side, then I'll start at the front, and I've got some curved scissors that make this easier. I'll start right where the eye of the hook is, and I'll use the curved scissors just to trim the top and the sides, laying it up against the eye of the hook and trimming the ball of deer hair to a sort of curved shape from the eye towards the back. And then come from the other side. I got some deer hair here that's overlapped at the back, so I'll have to do the same thing as I did with the others. I'll come in from behind, lay the scissors down on the flash, and just push the deer hair between the jaws of the scissors, and that'll, you can see there's a few bits that are sticking here. I'll get those. So we still have deer hair sticking over the top, which is the collar. There's scissors again. And I'll do from the eye of the hook that curved shape back that creates kind of a a bit of a ramp from the front to the back, a bit of a ball where the deer hair is, ball shape, a little bit there. So this is the tricky part, is using your two hands leaning up against the fly, up against the scissors, to place the scissors so that they get the deer hair you want and not everything else. Missed about there. One more there, I think. And a few bits that stick out. So now we have it flat on the bottom and tapered from the front to the back, a nice compact ball with this collar at the back. And from what I understand in reading the book, the whole purpose of this is to create a collar that is from the midline of the hook up over top of where this flash is, with deer hair that kind of is on top of that flash. And the purpose of that is to cause some turbulence when the fly is being stripped, to cause turbulence that makes this flash undulate. And then what I'll do is just come back here. So the little flash is just a little on the long side. And I don't want it completely even, so I'll snip some of these long fibers off just to give a little more ragged appearance to the tail. A couple of long ones there. And that's it. That's my Dahlberg Flashdance streamer. So I will put in here and remove the spotlight. So that's him. So now it's Florin's turn.
All right, that's a nice fly, Dave. As we talked earlier today, probably for the local lakes here, a couple of sizes down or so would be better. So here I'm tying something significantly smaller. This is a size 10 hook, and it's a little bit of a continuation of similar ideas as I was doing last week. Insofar as I'm putting either bead chain or foam eyes on the fly, but the focus here is more on manipulating peacock herl, and so that's going to be the main focus. Now I'm going to do a little bit of a thread bump here. This takes a little while because this is 8/0 thread. And let's see, the first one I'm going to do with bead chain. So this is, for this size hook, 1/8 of an inch bead chain is good enough. If you wanted to look funnier, you can get a bigger size, but I think for this should be enough to turn it over. And crisscross here to secure your eyes properly, and then move the thread to the back. Now for the tail, if you want to keep it simple, just use a little bit of flash. And I like this gunmetal flash, which is fairly soft. And so I'll just take it out of the tube here. You can see it's even softer than the fine Flashabou, and it's certainly softer than most of the crystal flash you can get on the market. So all I need for a tail is one strand of this stuff, which I'm going to fold repeatedly. So fold, cut, fold again, cut, fold one more time. That's probably, you don't want to overpower it either. Okay, so this is thick enough of a tail for my taste. So I'm just going to attach this to the hook shank. Just going to wrap over it and then bring the thread back. Okay. You can do the usual trick of putting a couple of wraps of thread behind the tail to make sure it doesn't point down and get fouled in the hook itself, and then trim it to whatever length you like to have your tails at. Okay, now for the body, which is the part I wanted to demonstrate, I'm going to need some peacock herl. And for a fly this size, depending how ratty or bushy your peacock herl is, this is somewhat ratty. It's not very thick. So 2 strands will do fine. And I'm going to attach it after I cut the tips, which are always very fragile if you buy this kind of stripped peacock herl. If you get it from an eye feather, the higher up into the eye you go, those fibers, they're quite fine, but they're also quite strong. Okay, so what I normally do for reinforcing peacock is the following. So the easiest thing is you just use the same thread as you're tying with, do a dubbing loop, put the peacock herl in the dubbing loop, and then twist it and wrap it on the hook shank. It's foolproof. It doesn't break. Your peacock herl stays there for as many fish as you care to catch. Now, if you want to add some flash, so get an effect like these flash core chenilles that used to be a popular number of years ago. One way to do that is you take a strand of krystal flash. Now, this is a bit long. I'm just going to take half of this. So you can do medium flash or a lot of flash. So I'm just going to go for somewhat medium flash here. So I'm going to attach my strand of Perl krystal flash. And now I'm going to move the thread forward and out of the way. There we go. And now I have 2 strands of peacock and 1 strand of krystal flash. You can probably see it here. Okay. The tool to use here that I find easiest to work with is a simple rotating hackle plier like this one by Griffin. This used to be really cheap and readily available. It's gotten up in price. I think it's still available here and there. Tiemco makes a kind of a fancier version of this. But anyway, they both work. So what you do is you pull them straight so that your 3 strands are all the same length. You secure them in your rotating pliers. And then if you don't want things to get tangled up as you're tying, just trim these bits at the end, right? And then just twist this. And as you can see, what's happening here is you're getting all of this wrapped together into a nice little rope. So now, once you've got this tight enough, with significant care, because you've got hooks like these, this is a little barbless curved hook. These things are insanely sharp, which can cut your peacock and and krystal flash in a fraction of a second. So just carefully around that hook point. There you go. And you can see as I'm wrapping, there are subtle highlights inside that, that peacock. And then you can keep tightening the rope as you're moving forward. When you get to the eye here, you want to fill that space between the eyes. So do a few turns behind the eyes and then go up above between the eyes one more time to also cover the underside, and then move the peacock rope up front. So again, tighten it. Couple more turns and reaching the end here. Okay, so there we go. Secure with a couple of turns of thread. Move the thread in front of the herl, another couple of turns, and then it's safe to cut. And that's essentially the fly. Now just a couple of whip finishes, because with peacock herl, I do not, there's just too much fuzz here to risk head cement. So a couple of whip finishes and that's good to go. So that's the basic fly. And then you can just vary. So you can see this is more or less a vampire leech, but you know, without the marabou and without the jig hook. And this achieves the same effect as a jig hook, right? It's gonna fish upside down. Okay. Then I'm just going to
Nice simple fly.
I'm a lazy guy. I like simple flies.
I do too.
So it's and it does work. I've been tying this, you know, I started, I think first time I tied a balanced version of this, and it was work. And then I went to a jig hook and a slotted bead, and it was expensive. And then I discovered these colored bead chain. And I'm like, yeah, okay, you know, this'll do. Okay, and because last week I was doing boobies, I thought, hey, you know, I never tried a booby version of this fly. So why not? So again, sticking with a color theme, just use Chartreuse foam. Attach it here at the front. And make sure that the thread kind of stays in the same channel in the center. Well, I guess this could have been a bit more symmetric. I can always do some trimming at the end. I got maybe 0.5 millimeter or so more on one side than on the other.
It's okay, Florin. I think sometimes the fish look for the mutant versions, which are easier to catch.
Right, yes, yes, yes. The beauty that's in the asymmetry, of course. We'll leave it at that. So this is, you know, just slightly oversized. That's okay. That's what these flies are meant to be, over the top. Okay, now if you like to have marabou for the tail, you can do the flash in one of two ways. You can put the flash at the base, or you can put the flash on top, or rather not on top, but on the sides of the tail. Now, given how limp this is, putting it at the base as a support for the Marabou is not going to help an awful lot. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to try to do the other way. I'm gonna pull a feather here from this Marabou pack. And just get a little clump of fibers. Pull it off. And like Dave was pointing out earlier, sometimes you don't want these things to be uniform. You want them to be raggedy. And with Marabou, you just pinch with your fingers and you break it off, and that'll give you a ragged look. Okay, I don't need all of this stuff. That's way too much, so I'm just gonna trim it off. And there we go. Fuzzy stuff. Now, I don't like to lick my feathers, so I'm just going to, this is Marabou, so it's sometimes a little bit unruly. Now, a little bit of water in a plastic cup will do the trick very nicely. And now this is going to be a little bit more manageable than it was before. Not an awful lot. I mean, there's still Marabou, right? So here, that's kind of the tail I probably want. And I can put it on. And this just becomes an underbody, the rest of it. Okay, this has no support, so it's quite important to put a thread wrap underneath. I put 2. I don't know if 2 is better than 1, but there it is. And now I'm going to get a little bit of flash. And in this case, so you see, I took a simple fly and now I'm making it complicated. Which, you know, try at home at your own risk. Okay, now I just want a little bit of flash. I don't want to overdo this. So I'm taking half a strand, fold it, cut, fold again, cut. And now I'm going to measure this on the side, secure with a couple of turns of thread, and grab the remaining fibers, fold them over to the other side, and secure with a few turns of thread. Now this is obviously the wrong length, so I'm just gonna chop it off. One side, the other side is pretty good length because I measured it that way. So now I'm happy with this. I have Marabou in the middle and a little bit of flash on either side. Okay. So it's a bit of a mixed tail. It looks like, I don't know if it's glare or my focus needs a tiny little bit of adjusting. Okay. There we go. So now we repeat the trick with the peacock. Get a couple of, see, I'm trying to pull it by the tip and it just breaks off. It doesn't even want to come out of the bundle. So the problem with peacock is that, you know, it's very fragile at the top, but if you go too far close to the base, then it becomes, or, you know, so much less fuzzy. So it's a lot stronger down here, but not as fuzzy. So you kind of have to find a sweet spot far enough away from the tip and far enough away from the bottom. So now I'm going to do, again, with the flash built in. Let's see. What I'm going to do is, given that last time it seems like I had a little bit too much. I'm going to fold this over. So it'll be a little bit trickier. So about here, I think. So I folded the crystal flash strand in two. It's not very long. It's not as long as the peacock. I'm gonna see if that's enough or not. Just make sure you go all the way to the base of the tail, and then move the thread out of the way, and all the way to the eye of the hook. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna pull this to the end of the folded crystal flash, as close as I can be to the end, and grab all three strands together, and then trim the bottoms. And then you will notice that this is a much flashier rope, right? So you can regulate, you know, for minimum flash, if you just like the look of pure peacock, you just use your tying thread. Black will do very well. If you want a bit of flash, you put one strand. If you want a lot more flash, and this, the flash stuff is going to show off a lot more once the fly gets wet. And then this flashiness is going to come through quite strongly. So here, around the eye, and then in front. Just kind of fill in the gaps with the peacock. There it goes. A couple of turns to secure, then a couple of turns in front. And cut. And time for whip finishing. On whip finish. Finish this. And the fly is done. So this is the booby version, and with built-in fish attracting asymmetry. There you go.
Very nice booby fly.
So how would you fish that?
On a sinking line, I think, unless I'm trying to make a top water disturbance and attract some bass with it. In which case I would just fish it on a regular dry line. But otherwise, this would be best fished on a sinking line above the weeds. So you can drag your line along the bottom without snags, and your fly on a reasonably short leader is going to be cruising along above all that snaggery. So that's the idea for these types of flies. Same as what I was tying last week. It's just a different kind of body combo. And I'm trying to develop the challenge is to get big enough foam that will float a sturdy salmon hook. But I'd like to try a similar strategy for salmon fishing. So I'm thinking, you know, when you use your T14 and drag it along the bottom in Campbell River, you lose a fair amount of flies on rocks and other nasties. And I'm thinking, well, and usually it's the hook that gets snagged. So if you could make that hook ride just a little bit higher, that might be the ticket to success. Unless, of course, you're catching a fish on every cast, and so the fly does not get a chance to snag the bottom. But that's the advanced class, so I can't speak to that. You have to ask the local expert for that.
Well, it's supposed to be a good run of pink this year, so we'll see.
If it's half as good as last year,
Last
good
year
enough.
last year was recorded as the poor year.
oh, okay, well then I'm staying home this year because
Yeah.
that was just like, you know, one full day and 2 half days was a bit much.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a phenomenal run this year.
Yeah, well, I don't want to end up with whatever busted shoulders and whatnot, you know,
Mhm.
replacing this bit and that bit because of too many fish.
Dave, I think you can stop the recording.
Yeah, that would be good.